Asterisk the fluorescent lights hummed softly in the hospital corridor as Margaret Wilson finished her evening shift. At 58, she had been a nurse for over 30 years, and her gentle hands had comforted countless patients through their darkest hours. Tonight had been particularly long, a difficult surgery, worried families, and the kind of heartache that comes with caring deeply for others. Asterisk as she gathered her coat and purse, Margaret noticed the rain pattering against the windows. April showers in Seattle could be relentless, and tonight was no exception. She pulled her umbrella from her bag, thinking of the warm cup of tea waiting for her at home, and the mystery novel she'd left bookmarked on her nightstand. Asterisk the automatic doors whooshed open, and she stepped into the cool evening air. The parking lot was nearly empty now, just a few scattered cars belonging to the night shift. As she walked toward her old Honda Civic, something caught her eye near the bus stop. Asterisk a man sat hunched on the bench, his shoulders shaking not from the cold, but from quiet sobs that cut through the sound of the rain. He wore a wrinkled button-down shirt and dark slacks that were now soaked through. No jacket, no umbrella, just a grown man sitting alone in the April downpour. Asterisk Margaret paused. In 3 decades of nursing, she had learned to recognize genuine distress, and this man was drowning in something far deeper than rainwater. Her motherly instincts, honed by years of caring for her own 2 children and countless patients, wouldn't let her simply drive away. Asterisk she approached slowly, her umbrella casting a small circle of dryness in the wet night. "Excuse me," she said gently, her voice carrying the same warm tone she used with frightened patients. "Are you all right, dear?" Asterisk the man looked up, and Margaret's heart clenched. His eyes were red-rimmed and hollow, the kind of emptiness she'd seen too many times in hospital waiting rooms. He appeared to be in his early 40s, with dark hair plastered to his forehead and a face etched with the kind of pain that comes from losing everything that matters. Asterisk I'm sorry, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to. I'll move along." Asterisk nonsense, Margaret replied, stepping closer to extend her umbrella over both of them. "You'll catch pneumonia sitting out here like this. What's happened?" "Can I help you somehow?" Asterisk the stranger David, he told her after a moment's hesitation, looked at her with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. "You don't understand," he said. "I've lost everything. My job, my house, and 3 days ago, my wife passed away from cancer. I came here hoping to say goodbye properly, but visiting hours were over. I've been sitting here trying to figure out what to do next." Asterisk Margaret felt her heart break her. Little more. She had seen this before, people so overwhelmed by grief that they couldn't find their way home, couldn't remember how to take the next step. Without hesitation, she sat down beside him on the wet bench, holding her umbrella steady over both their heads. Asterisk I'm so sorry for your loss, she said, and meant every word. Losing someone you love, there's no pain quite like it. But you can't sit out here in the rain. When did you last eat something? Asterisk David shook his head. "I can't remember. Yesterday, maybe." "It doesn't matter." Asterisk it does matter, Margaret said, firmly but kindly. "Your wife wouldn't want you to waste away out here. She'd want you to take care of yourself, wouldn't she?" Asterisk fresh tears mixed with the raindrops on David's face. "She always said I didn't take good enough care of myself, always reminding me to eat lunch, to wear a jacket when it was cold." Asterisk Margaret smiled softly. "She sounds like a wise woman. Come on, let me drive you somewhere warm. There's a little diner about 10 minutes from here, nothing fancy, but they make a good bowl of soup and they're open late. My treat. Asterisk I couldn't ask you to. Asterisk you're not asking, I'm offering. And after 30 years as a nurse, I've learned Not to take no for an answer when someone needs help. David looked at her for a long moment, as if trying to understand why a complete stranger would show him such kindness. Finally, he nodded. The diner was exactly as Margaret had described her. Small, cozy place with red vinyl booths and the comforting smell of coffee and homemade bread. They sat across from each other, and slowly, between spoonfuls of chicken soup and sips of hot coffee, David began to tell his story. He had been a successful architect, he explained. He and his wife Sarah had built a beautiful life together. Nice home, plans for children, dreams of growing old together. But when Sarah was diagnosed with aggressive cancer 18 months ago, everything began to unravel. The medical bills, even with insurance, were staggering. He'd sold everything they owned, taken out loans, done whatever it took to get her the best treatment possible. She fought so hard, David said, his voice thick with emotion, right until the end. She was more worried about me than herself. The last thing she said was that she hoped I'd find a way to be happy again. Margaret reached across the table and patted his hand. She loved you very much. That's clear from everything you've told me. I don't know how to be happy without her, David admitted. We were going to celebrate our 15th anniversary next month. We had it all planned, a trip to the coast, the little bed and breakfast where we spent our honeymoon. Now I can't even afford a bus ticket out of town. They talked for nearly 2 hours. Margaret told him about her own losses. Her husband, of 25 years, who had passed from a heart attack 5 years earlier. The way grief could feel like drowning some days and like a gentle leak on others. She spoke about her children, now grown with families of their own, and how she'd found purpose in caring for others after her own world had shifted. The thing about kindness, she said as they prepared to leave, is that it doesn't cost anything, but it's worth everything. Someone showed me that once, during the worst period of my life, a stranger who took the time to sit with me when I felt completely alone. Margaret drove David to a modest motel nearby and paid for a week's stay. Despite his protests, she gave him her phone number and made him promise to call if he needed anything. As she prepared to leave, David caught her on gently. Why? He asked, why would you do all this for someone you don't even know? Margaret smiled. The same warm smile she'd given to countless patients and their families over the years, because everyone deserves kindness, especially when they're at their lowest point, and because I've learned that when we help others, we help ourselves heal too. 3 months later, Margaret was surprised to receive a phone call at the hospital. The voice on the other end was familiar, but stronger now, more hopeful. Mrs. Wilson, this is David. From the diner. I wanted to thank you again, and to tell you something I probably should have mentioned that night. Margaret smiled, remembering the broken man in the rain. How are you doing? Dear, I've thought about you often. Much better. Thanks to you, I got back on my feet. Found work with a firm here in town. But I wanted you to know, that building where we met, where you work, I designed it 15 years ago. When Sarah and I were first married, that was my first major project. I was so proud of it, so excited about my career. Margaret felt a chill of recognition. The children's wing, the one with all the windows and the garden view. That's the one. Sarah insisted on the garden view. She said sick children needed to see growing things, needed hope. I never imagined that years later, that same building would be where I'd meet an angel in the parking lot. As Margaret hung up the phone, she thought about the mysterious ways life weaves people together. How the building that David had designed with such love and hope had become the place where kindness had found him in his darkest hour. How the same corridors where she'd spent decades caring for others had led her to someone who needed her help in the simplest, most profound way. Asterisk that evening. As she walked through those familiar halls, Margaret looked up at the architectural details she'd never really noticed before: the careful placement of windows, the way the light fell just right, the thoughtful design that made even a hospital feel a little more like home. She thought about David and Sarah, about love that persists even after loss, and about the small acts of kindness that connect us all. Asterisk sometimes, she reflected, we are all just strangers in the rain, waiting for someone to offer us shelter. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, we get to be the one holding the umbrella.